Who's taking care of the waiting room?
Me.
Sweetie drink. Oh,
I admitted
there's
to.
Merle's there and it's there.
He is there. He's joining at the moment.
Oh, goodness. Yeah,
I did. He's currently joining.
yeah, Michelle.
You can press admit again. Yep. Mm-hmm. Then he's over invited. That's better.
All right, well, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll get started. So hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to our April monthly program with PBAS, and also kind of co-hosted with Claymont Society. So we're really excited for our presenter today and topic. I'm first just going to share a few updates from our organization, from the Potomac Valley Audubon Society, where I work as the Associate Director of Education. So spring programs are afoot. We've had tons of different walks in nature, guided walks in nature led by volunteers. So you can see the beautiful Virginia bluebells right there. Lots of different wildflower walks, and then other walks that you just happen to see wildflowers on because there's so many out and about. So we had the wellness walk earlier this week, bird walk, where there are 43 different species identified at Cool Spring Preserve, including some warblers. So definitely that early spring migration stuff is getting some momentum and being very, very exciting. Another fun update from this week is we reopened our nature center. So the Case Nature Center is open now on Tuesdays from 9:30 to 3. And as you can see there, we have two of our friendly docents, Rich and Bill, and have some things set out, fun puzzles, just a fun place to come and hang out and get excited about nature. Of course, the other things like meeting our animal ambassadors, like our turtles and snake, and just learning more about our preserves and programs are all options when you stop by the Nature Center. This week, we also have spring break camp. Some kids today were planting trees out on the preserve and yeah, just having lots of other fun nature stuff. And there's going to be opportunities I'll talk about in a minute that you can plant some trees too. And it's right here. So just to highlight a few of the upcoming work days that we have. So we have work days happening at a few of our different preserves. Tree plantings happening at Cool Spring and at Stoffers Marsh. Some work that's to be done at Eidolon as well, getting that all up and ready. Some special volunteer work days, like working to reduce the population of spotted lanternflies, as well as at least one volunteer workday elsewhere over near Boonesboro. So lots of opportunities to care for the land, care for PBS preserves and other places in our area. And of course, if you want to care for the land at home, a great way to do that is with our spring plant sale. So online pre-orders are starting really soon, April 24th, so it's just around the corner. And that's a really great thing to do because then you can just show up at Sunny Meadows and just pick up your plants and be on your way on May 17th, which is that pickup day. Of course, it's also fun if you don't do the pre-order to still come by and see what's there. But if you have a very specific plan, if you're inspired by her to be very specific about planning your garden, pre-order is definitely the way to go. Something else very exciting on the horizon. We don't have registration open yet and invitations haven't gone out, but we would love for you to go ahead and save the date. So we are going to be having a spring fundraiser, a garden party with a view at Long Meadows Farm. That's this beautiful preserved farmland area near Shepherdstown. And yeah, it's going to be a lovely event. Beautiful views, some delicious treats, and supporting the work that we do. So please consider coming and put that date on your calendar. Finally, I want to announce the next monthly program. So this one is gonna be on a Wednesday, so that's just a little bit different, so I wanted to emphasize that. And we're very excited to have Maria back. So previously, you may remember that Maria Russo did a monthly program for us, where she talked about PFAS, with another person from West Virginia Rivers Coalition. This time, she's gonna be coming back to do a recap of the 2025 legislative session. So talking about different bills that made it, different bills that didn't make it pertaining to water issues in our state. So that's gonna be a really interesting presentation. We're very, very glad to have her. And Ellen, could you help me for a moment? I think this.
Oh, yeah.
Moment. Great. And so I think it's time to move on to the main event of the evening, our monthly program. So again, this is co-hosted with Claymont, and it's kind of a two-parter because tonight Herb Peddicord, our guest speaker, is going to be talking about the forest management plan that he created for Claymont Society, the retreat center there, and the vast grounds that they have there. On Saturday, there's going to be a walk. So that walk is going to be ambling through the woods with Herb to take measurements and to just have some of that like real world, real life practice in learning how foresters take measurements out in the field, or rather out in the forest, and then translate that into this kind of forest management plan. So that is the plan. There is information on our website about that. Again, that's on Saturday, this Saturday. And it does require registration. It's limited to 30 people in the group. So make sure to sign up. The group will be meeting at the Great Barn. And I think that's all I wanted to say about that.
What's the times of that? I don't even know, 10 o'clock to,
Oh, it starts at noon.
oh, starts at noon.
Yes. Starts at noon.
I'm glad I didn't show up at 10.
Nobody showed up, I was there 2 hours.
Yeah, it's gonna be hot too. It's gonna be like in the 80s, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is gonna be very hot on Saturday, so definitely bring that water if you're planning on coming, for sure. For sure. Okay, well, at this point, I would like to introduce Herb Peddicord, our guest speaker. So Herb is originally from Ohio, and he received his bachelor's in forest resource management from the University of Idaho. After stints in the Army and at a bookbinding company, it was not until 2002 that he began working for the West Virginia Division of Forestry as a service forester in Morgan County. At the time of his retirement in 2019, he was the West Virginia Chesapeake Bay watershed forester responsible for the 8 Potomac drainage counties. Since then, he has started his own forestry consultant business. He is a former board member for PVAS and a current board member for the Apecan watershed. He resides with his wife. Thank you so much, Herb, for being here, and let's welcome him.
Yeah, I'm gonna stand back here for the mic. And I've got a picture of the PowerPoint here, so. Nice to be here. I'm honored, really. Not worthy. But, what we're gonna talk about, let me just cover a few things. Before we get to the Claymont plan, we're kind of gonna dissect the Claymont plan, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the different kinds of stewardship plans or management plans you can get, or forest plans. There's a lot of different names, a lot of different ways to get a plan. How many in the room have a plan? You have a plan. Excellent. So we're gonna kind of do a general overview of different forest management plans. So I'm gonna go through some of these slides pretty quick, because you're going to see a bunch of stuff that's in these plans, and we're really going to talk about the Forest Stewardship Plan, which is a really good detailed plan. And again, the Claymont plan will be the one we're talking about.
can kind of keep talking. She just has to share the screen because we realized we didn't do that with our,
Oh, with the group.
with the online group. They cannot see what we're seeing.
Oh.
We have now started screen sharing. Woohoo!
So the picture here, this is my daughter, actually, this is several years ago, she's 25 now. She's holding a plot stick, which I was doing an inventory at the time, I don't know why she was with me this day. And you can see there's two tulip poplars in the background, you can see the understory is very robust. You can recognize anything in the understory there and the.
Maybe some wineberry? Yes.
And Bar.
Yeah, definitely wineberry. Yeah, what's the green thing down here?
Barberry.
Yeah, it's barberry also. And so this property was pretty typical invasives, right, Sabi?
Yeah.
So this is what you have in West Virginia, really. You either have a lot of invasives in your understory, or you don't have any understory. And why is that?
Deer.
Deer. Deer is the biggest problem that we deal with, and it's my biggest problem in the woods when I'm talking to people. So that'll be something we'll see at Claymont, I think, on Saturday. So yeah, I really encourage you to come out on Saturday too, to kind of see a very mature woodland. Actually, we're going to be in the North Woods. We're going to look at some tree plantings and look at some of the invasive species and some of the other stands, but mainly we're going to be out at Claymont in stand 1. So we're going to talk a little bit about stand 1 in more detail, but yeah, this is what you have here. So what is a forest management plan? I mean, you can read this over. Hopefully people online can see now. It's really a document that outlines, it's a long-term forecast for your forest land. And there are specific management guidelines in these plans. All right. It doesn't all have to be timber harvesting. Claymont's not interested in timber harvesting, so they're interested in other things. So when you talk about forest management as a whole, you're talking about deer management, you're talking about the wildlife, fire management, you're talking about recreation. And so all the other things that go with your land, you're trying to plan them to have the healthiest forest possible. So it's going to be a guide. And so in order to create this guide, we go out and do these forest analysis and come up with a forest management plan. And there's different kinds of management plans. And when I was a service forester there, I dealt with the managed timberland program. So people have a timber tax break. They're like, we need a plan. Well, you want, what kind of plan? So they're like, what kind of plan do I need? I said, well, I mean, we didn't really want to tell them you really need a written plan, because at that time, you know, with forest management, timber tax break, they could almost have a plan in their head, actually. So, the questions you want to ask is, why do you want to plan? How many acres do you have? That really affects the scope of your plan. And then how much money you want to spend, because if you really want a good plan, you got to spend a little bit more money. Right? You don't have a lot of money, you just can get a basic plan. But so what kind of plans do we have here? Something in your head. So I do have landowners that I've dealt with that have a plan in their head. And really, you need to write it down, but the managed timberland program, almost at that time, just required the landowners to have some kind of an idea of what they wanted to do. And we always encourage them to write it down, but You know, you can have a plan in your head, but it really needs to be something written down on a piece of paper. So what is, you can talk about the minimum things you really need for these plans. And so if I would say the minimum things that you need is probably, you need some objectives, you need to have a map of maybe your different areas of your property. And then you need to have some kind of a idea of what you want to do with these areas. Okay. And you can put that on a piece of paper and you say, oh, well, in 2030, I want to, you know, maybe do a thinning on this area. So, you know, that's kind of vague. So you really kind of want to have more than just a really vague plan written down. And they can get pretty detailed, all right? A forest management plan, I would say, would be the next step up. We're gonna step up here as we go. And there's a lot of different ways to get these management plans, all right? I would say if I'm doing a forest management plan for people, I'm really not going through any cost share. A lot of these cost share plans that we're gonna talk about are coming up next, the stewardship plans and the NRCS plans, and maybe even the carbon plans. They're giving you money to implement these plans, and that money's passed to me, of course, I'm the provider of the plan. So if you want a forest management plan, and you don't want to go through any of these programs, you just want a basic plan, and it's gonna be, you know, a charge per acre based on how many acres you have. So I can give them a basic plan, and really my management plans aren't really too bad because they're almost like a stewardship plan, but because I just cut some stuff out of them and use the same template, but so a forest management plan with carbon standards. Some of these, this is a new thing here. So if you have property that you think you want to put in some kind of a carbon program, there's a lot more carbon programs out there right now that will pay you to not cut your timber. All right, that's basically what it comes down to. They want your trees to store carbon. All right. So that's a decision every landowner has to make, is if they have a nice stand of timber, how much money are they going to make from the carbon program? They're going to pay you for 20 years in some of these programs. So there's a long-term contract. And so, and they'll actually pay for a plan, but their plans aren't really as detailed as that I've seen. I am a carbon forester for the Family Forest Carbon Program, and their plans do not include an inventory right now, and which has surprised me. But if they're going to pay for the plan, you don't have to do a forest inventory. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Forest stewardship plan then with specific standards is what Claymont has. This was a cost share plan through the Division of Forestry, and it's federal funding. And it's Chesapeake Bay funding, so it's all tied together. The Chesapeake Bay, they want more plans done in their bay area to better manage the forest, to be a healthier forest. So they will support these stewardship plans. And we're going to talk more in depth about the stewardship plans. That's when we talk about the Claymont at the end here. Is there a clock around there somewhere?
One here. One here.
No. I just need to keep track of my time here, so I'll just. 7:20. I could talk so much and long-winded because there's so much to talk about, but and I don't want to be boring, so we're gonna fly through some of this stuff here. And I'm just going to give you a sense of what is involved in some of these plans. We're not going to talk about each one of these items generally until we get to look at the Claymont plan. But a lot of these things you can read down there are very similar in the forest carbon plan and the NRCS plan and the stewardship plan. I'm just looking for stuff that's different. The forest carbon management plan, management section is a separate section in the plan. It would be different. Forest resilience really is I've never done one of these plans. Actually, I have a plan to do this fall that's with this carbon template. And so this is what they sent me, and I'm like, yeah, that's it's pretty basic, some of the stuff in here. And you'll see this stuff again. All this stuff here is pretty normal to have in a plan. And these are all the topics that I told you that you're managing for when you do these forest management plans. Agroforestry is another good one. So again, the NRCS plans, in order to get one of these plans, you have to go through the NRCS program. That's National Resource Conservation Service. Okay, they will pay for plans if you qualify. So who does their plans? Well, they have foresters on their list as technical service providers. So these TSPs, they're called, and I am not a TSP. I don't want to be a TSP. I'm too busy already anyways. But I do NRCS plans, but not through NRCS. So for instance, if farmland preservation, if they are required to get a plan, then it has to be under NRCS standards. So I do plans for farmland preservation and I follow the NRCS standards, and then it has to be approved by NRCS. So I have done those plans before. But they're pretty much like the stewardship plan with some extra stuff thrown in. So this is all stuff that's going to be in the NRCS plan here. And again, these items are pretty similar to what we're going to see in the stewardship plan. All right. I highlighted that first statement there because it's important. You're identifying resource concerns based on an inventory. Okay, so that's an important part. And when I said, the carbon program, they don't really require an inventory. That you do have to do a certain number of plots originally. If a if a landowner does not have a plan, you do have to do some inventory plots. But generally, if they're paying for a plan, you don't have to provide an inventory in the plan. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the inventory section, because that's important. And I always tell people you need an inventory. I run into a lot of plans done, so you can get plans done by the NRCS forester. Other foresters are doing other plans. And for instance, we used to have the pulp and paper mill out of Mead West Vaco, out of Luke, Maryland. They had foresters that were procuring timber around. They would do plans for people for free. And so that we don't have that resource anymore, at least around West Virginia. I don't know if you got any industry foresters up there doing free plans?
Not really.
Not really? So that's not an option for people to get free plans. We do have service foresters too that could be doing free plans. And I did about 5 plans a year when I was a service forester because we were required to do it, but now they've dropped that because we're so shorthanded. Everybody's dealing with fire and logging, and nobody's really doing plans anymore. So every plan that is going to go to a consultant forester. Anyways, so yes, getting this inventory is important. There's a lot of other stuff in there. So. In these plans generally, and we're still in the NRCS. Section here, but. This is very similar to what we deal with generally in any plan. You want to have goals for your stands. And a silviculture reproduction system. Now, we're not going to go into a long, hardcore discussion about silviculture, okay? Silviculture is like the art and science of managing forest land. And, you go to college for this stuff and, so we'll go over some different things, individual, if we're talking about timber harvesting here. Timber harvesting is an option. Individual tree selection, so that's like single tree selection, which I kind of recommend that Claymont could do that. Single tree selection if they needed some wood for a building project on the farm. Or firewood, they have a lot of dead wood, they could do some single tree selection even on the dead wood. So, and they have walnut trees, if they needed walnut wood, they could do single tree selection in some of the woods. So then you're getting into a more serious harvest about group selections or regeneration harvests, where you're trying to bring in some light on the forest floor if you have some seedlings already established, which is a long shot sometimes. And then you get into a shelter wood system, which is you're cutting just about, you're almost clear cutting, but you're leaving seed trees. So this is still a pretty intensive harvest. You're cutting everything except maybe 4 or 5 seed trees per acre. So it's generally a clear cut. And then a seed tree regeneration harvest system is, that's close to a shelter wood. There's maybe less trees even on this one. I'm thinking this one is maybe 4 or 5 trees per acre, and the shelter wood's a little bit more, but. And then you have the clear cut, which people don't really like the clear cut. And I don't recommend large clear cuts, but I'm putting clear cuts in all my plans, basically. I'm trying to talk people into it. Now, we don't have to cut 10 or 20 acres, just these small clear cuts to give a little bit of variety and have some wildlife, a chance for, the wildlife to hang out in these clear cut areas. 2 or 3 acres is maybe all I can get away with, but I've done the one landowner I have, he didn't have any openings in 500 acres. I said, you gotta get some openings. He had a good understory, though, a lot of greenbrier, but so we started, I said, let's do some clear cutting, and he was fine with it. He's letting me go with it, so we did a 10-acre clear cut. Long linear 10-acre clear cut, and it looks nice. And it's coming back, we don't want it coming back. We aren't worried about how it comes back. We want it to come back without invasives, but we want it to be a thick area. So these clear cuts are really good. Sometimes you get the oak really coming back in these clear cuts. But if you got deer, I'm telling you, you're not gonna get anything except invasives. So these management plans, yeah, go ahead.
When you have a clear cut like that, do you ever recommend like deer exposures for around the areas and keep the deer down or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody doing deer exposures.
Not anymore? I know.
You've gotta buy a 7-foot fence, and it's expensive.
Yeah.
It would be something to maybe experiment with on a smaller area.
Yeah.
And we put a deer, you ever use deer fencing on your repair and buffer projects or tree plantings?
Not really, maybe, 40 foot by 5 foot, just one roll of
Yeah.
wire size for small pine inclusions or something where you can't shelter
Yeah.
them, but.
I mean, we did one for Potomac Valley Audubon Society. They were involved in a tree planting that we did at Flowing Springs Park.
Yeah.
And they got a deer fence. And it was like we enclosed 2 acres. But the thing's gotta be maintained, the deer still get through it. And You get one deer to bust through the fence and then he runs around and eats everything.
But just off the laser beam up on the post and the fence out.
So the deer fence option is not really, I mean, we've tried the electric wire too. The number one thing I say to control the deer is shooting them, unfortunately. Herd control. All right, so you're talking about maps and the NRCS wants you to get involved in the wetlands delineation, and if there's a conservation plan, maybe they've done, if it's part of a farm, then too, that's I think the conservation plan they're talking about is a record, a past record of what was done. All right, now we're gonna get into the Forest Stewardship Plan. And then, again, this is a checklist we're using. Again, these plans are paid for by the federal government, giving money through grants through the state administers the program. And so there's standards involved in these programs. If the government is gonna pay for a program, they want the plans to be a certain standard. There's a cost share, there's a cost standard to it. And then this is what, so all of my plans done through this program, and most of my plans, I'd say I'm doing 20 plans a year under the stewardship program. And so my plans have to follow this guidelines right here too. And a lot of these things you see are similar to what we've seen on the other qualifications or conditions. So my plan has to go through this, this is a checklist I copied from what the service foresters are checking. I have to send them a copy of the plan, they check it off, that it has all the requirements. So the stewardship plan is a good plan. This is an example of how big it is, all right? The main plan, and you guys have a plan this big, this is another plan I'm giving to a lady here. But this is, the main plan is probably 25, 30 pages, and then you have all the extra information in the back. That's kind of not really required, but, so we're gonna go through Claymont's plan here in a minute. So this is an example, when we're doing these plans, we're doing a forest inventory, okay? So here we go. I'm gonna get away from the mic a little bit. Where they following me? Pam, follow me?
I think so, yep.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So. And what I'm wearing right now, I was out in the woods today, so I didn't change or anything. But this is usually what I wear. So this is a cruiser's vest, so we're gonna talk more about this stuff on Saturday, but basically, these are the tools of the trade. I got my water bottle here that I put in the back. But when you're saying plots, what's that mean? Well, if you have a stand that you've broken down, we're gonna look at the Claymont stands in a minute here. And you have a stand, maybe 10 to 19 acres, they're gonna require 5 plots. I have to do 5 plots. Now, I don't pay attention to this too much, honestly, because I do many more plots than I need to. And the guys that said, man, you're doing a lot of plots. I say, man, I wanna see the property. I wanna do all these plots so I can see the whole property. I'm not gonna do, 6 plots on a 30 acres. I'm gonna probably do, I used to do 1 plot per acre, and that's kind of ridiculous, but on the small properties, I'm doing 1 plot per acre, pretty much. And like Claymont was, how many acres of forest was Claymont? 180?
180.
Yeah, and I did 107 plots. So that probably was overkill. If you get into a stand that's very uniform, it's all statistics. So I was doing a plan it was 900 acres. And the guy had 100 acres just right on the west the west slope of North River Mountain. So it was like rough ground. And it was all pine, chestnut oak and red oak, it was all the same. So 100 acres, I had these, 30 plots, 30 or 40 plots. I'm like, I got 20 of them done. I'm like, it's all the same. It was overkill, so I knocked it back a little bit, but, so sometimes if the stand is uniform, you don't have to do all those plots. But again, like I said, I like to see the whole property and really, kind of really get intimately involved in what the property looks like, so. But this is a minimum, so you do have cruise intensity guidelines. Now I was away from the mic. You guys hear me okay online? All right. Okay. Anyways. My plot stick, you saw it probably in the picture with my daughter there, it's a different one here, but. Biltmore stick, measure all the trees with this. This is so how am I going to these plots? Well, I'm making a map. I just brought my map too to show you. Before we get to, there, I pasted all this together. This is Claymont. And all the dots, you can see them. The camera got me.
Pretty close, yep.
Those are all the points I had to go to. So I'm not doing a grid, really. I'm just putting these plots on the terrain navigator map that I have on my computer. And I'm downloading these locations to my GPS. It's really easy. That's about as tech as I get, really, because I used to do pace and distance with compass and all that stuff, but this is nice. Going to a plot with the GPS, it's really easy. And so once you get to the plot, then you're doing your inventory data, which you're using your prism here to measure your in trees and out trees. And I'm writing everything down. Some people have little iPads and they're doing all this stuff, on your iPad. And I just like to write it down. I like to have, I'm kind of old school there. I'm writing down each plot, I'm making observations on each plot, I'm just, doing a lot of writing and taking a lot of notes. Because that's the way I do it. And so,
How many plots can you do in a day?
it depends on a lot. Claymont, I didn't do very many in a day. It's hard to get around there in some of those things. So I can generally do about 30 plots a day, but if I do 24, I'm doing okay. But when I get a property, a really big property that I'm doing, I did 300 plots on one property, and it was like, it took me a long time, like 10 or 12 days. I mean, it's a lot of work. Walking every inch of 900 acres, but it's just a lot of fun, really. I mean, it's cool. So then once you get to the plots, then you're doing, you're taking an inventory and you're getting these people really a good detailed report on what a stand looks like, all right? Okay, so there's the title page, and this is where we're gonna go to next. And that's good, we got about 15 minutes, we're not gonna spend a whole lot of time on this, we're gonna look at the different categories, and we're gonna hopefully have time to look at stand one, and then we'll talk more if you come on Saturday, more detail, but this plan, as you can see, was just done last fall, or last December. Claymont's a fascinating place, and so, Sivey, why is Claymont a fascinating place? I mean, you guys do so much out there,
Yeah,
and it's just very spiritual place too,
it is.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's an educational retreat center that has a lot of different kinds of architecture because it's also was a Washington family home. And there's a lot of different kinds of projects happening there at once. There's a farm, there's like a native indigenous, like recreation, cultural center. And then educational retreats come through and have their own sort of like yoga or spiritual meditation retreats.
Yeah, and I worked with them when I was a service forester, when I was a Chesapeake Bay watershed forester. We did several buffer plantings out there is really where I got to know everybody. And, you know, we do a buffer planting on that first one we did. Were you there at the rain, in the rain?
I was.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
Oh, I
And-
there too.
oh, yeah. So it rained, but we had people there. I mean, there were people there from all over the country. I mean, these license plates were, it was crazy, but so you guys have a good, you know, good way to get out to the people and they're dedicated to you. So the other thing I've done out at Claymont is measure big trees. So they did win the big sassafras tree contest we had last year. With John Overton has that biggest tree in the eastern panhandle, and so we had sassafras. So Claymont, you know, they have some big trees. So we'll see some big trees out there. Some of the big white oaks they have, you know, aren't really in the top 10 in the state. They have some big poplars, you know, there's other big trees I need to measure, probably, the big Osage orange you have. The big honey locust out there in the field, I found that the other day, I'm like, oh crap, this is a big tree. And then the big black oak, of course, the one that blew over, but there's still a big one there. And then, so it's a great place, lots of trails through there, and so I was really happy that they decided to get a plan. So, we're gonna not do that, so I'm gonna escape. And. Just,
So go to the tabs up top.
yeah, no, there's, I'm trying to get my mouse. All right, so, go to the plan first there. Yeah, so well, this doesn't really show up that well, but we'll look at a map here of the outline of Claymont. It's out on Hewitt Road in Charlestown, south of Charlestown. And you can see, you know, they have, this is an aerial, so you see they have a lot of open land too. It was kind of difficult figuring out the forest land, and I could have GPSed that a little better, probably the stand map, because my stand maps are really, I try to make them as accurate as possible, so. So you can see the forest land kind of there around the black line. So again, introduction letter, there's your table of contents, which really follows that checklist that I had. And I appreciate Claymont really letting me show people their plan. I don't generally share plans with people outside of giving it to the owner. So you can see there's a table of contents. So there's a mansion now. If you every time, sometimes you'll have open houses out there
Yeah, usually every Christmas.
every Christmas. So plan on going out and going in the mansion. It's pretty cool. What's the 1840 by Bushrod. So I like to include a little bit of history on some of these places when I do the background of the plan there. So the location, general description, I'll talk a little bit about the grounds themselves. And some of the history involved in forest especially. So the landowner objectives there are an important part of that. Boundaries and woodland description. This is always something that people don't realize that I do is I'm GPSing all the corners, and there was a lot of corners here. One of the reasons why it took me so long. Cause I'm kind of doing some of the corners while I'm doing my plots and here, you know, it was a problem because a lot of those pipes that they had in there, I couldn't find them. And sometimes the app I'm using, which is a hunter's app, shows the property boundaries. It wasn't really accurate here. I was in some guy's backyard. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just looking for the line. You know where it is?" You know, and so he didn't know where it was. but the whole, some of those lines are not marked. And I told them in the plan, you know, they're not marked very well, but whatever. So there's the total saw timber volume. Then I can come up with a total saw timber volume. Now, if you know what a board foot is, 12-inch board, 1-inch thick, 12 by 12, 1-inch thick. That's 1 board feet, okay? So if this is like totally new to you, then it won't be too impressive if they have 1 million board feet. That's a lot for one property. So, is that a lot? Bob? Yeah. That's a lot.
Bob is stunned to silence.
For 180 acres, so you know, I mean, they could have more than that if they had some of those stands, you know, really didn't have a lot in it, but. So we're talking with all these things, accessibility, these are the extra stuff that we put in there, that we're required to put in there. Archaeological, cultural, and historical information. We want to reference the West Virginia culture.org, that people find stuff, they need to maybe go online and educate themselves about that. The Forest of Recognized Importance. You know, this is a toughie sometimes. I'm just kind of leaving it to myself to make the designation of a 4. I mean, they want you to consult resource stuff, and I'm like, this is a 4 here. Claymont is a 4. It has a karst stream running through its springs. And, you know, the whole Bullskin Run, if you got a 300-acre parcel here with 180 acres of forest, it's recognized, it's an important forest. It's very important. So I classified it as a 4. I don't know what that ever do to it down the road, but if they ever get funding or whatever, they can get some funding because it's a 4, in my opinion. The table here was kind of leave the remote alone now. The table here was something I put in there, and it really kind of helps the NRCS kind of evaluate if there's a need for cost share. So I don't know if you guys, how'd you do your automology? Did you do any cost share, or it was just all volunteer?
It was all volunteer, but we would like to do NRCS
Yeah,
cost share.
and you still can, I think, so, they pick another area and you just gotta have them come out and take a look, and they wanna see your plan. And so it's kind of spelled out in here. And so you go down to the open block here, and that's 157 acres, and I don't have any data in there, because I'm not gonna go in that open area, I'm gonna go in the forest plan. Tell you, you had a lot of tree of heaven in the open area with all the other stuff, Bradford pears and the invasive, so that would be an area probably that you need more determination on. But you can see what I'm concerned about there is the autumn olive, the barberry, Oriental bittersweet. And it's probably controllable because it's not really everywhere. And the Atlantis, I'm always concerned about because it's a tree. And then each invasive is described. All right. Then you get the soil and water resources. Because this is a Chesapeake Bay plan, they want this part in italics here. Can you tell that? Yeah. I went into a lot of detail about this, so, because they want me to describe the buffer zone of the creek, and the creek is 6,000 feet running through that property. Some of it's dry, but then you got the spring and a 1,000-foot long shallow pond. It's really nice. It's all spring fed. And then it really is the beginning of Bullskin Run, that fork of Bullskin Run. It's a very cool place. The threatened and endangered species are significant here too, is another reason why it would be a forest of recognized importance. All right. And they're listed there. we're required to survey their, threatened and endangered species through the state. I talk a little bit about wildlife, and this is generally stand one that I put in here. And there's all these other things that I put in these plans that are required in most of them. Even the climate paragraph there wasn't really in here 3 or 4 years ago. This is a new paragraph. And these 3 programs in blue now are options for people. Just contact them and see if they're eligible, if you have forest land, just some options there. They do have their land under conservation easement, but we provide information for landowners, fire management, recreation. I put the wetlands paragraph in on this plan. It's an option to put it in there, but I put it in there on this one, of course, and pollinators. So there's so much to talk about. The soil, is just really great. This is limestone soil around here, you know that. It grows trees incredibly. So the site index, so how these are terms that. The red oak site index, how tall a tree will grow in 50 years. 85 feet. That's pretty good for us, a red oak site index. So in 50 years, you're gonna have an 85-foot tall red oak tree. And then, so the soils are really described in detail. There's a soils map. And the other special soil here, of course, is the marl soil, which if you don't know too much about marl, you got it up in Maryland too. The whole Great Limestone Valley or whatever runs from Pennsylvania down to Virginia. So this paragraph right here, karst, this special paragraph I put in on these karst plans needs to be, you need to know it's there. It's your primary consideration for any land use, any land activity. All right. Each soil is described there, and then your site index and forest types. And then your reconnaissance and cruise information is in there. It's kind of telling how many plots I did, how many plots were in each stand. I was going to stand down there and use my pointer, but you can kind of. Stand 1, 35 plots. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so stand 1, I wanted to do some plots in stand 1. It's really cool stand. It's got big trees. Big trees. It was a pleasure. And then each stand is described in detail. So let me just show you stand 1, if I can just kind of. So how do I, okay, there it is. All right, so there's my soils map. These are some of the maps here. I'm just gonna kind of go through and just show you the stand map in general. There's a boundary map, timber type and size. So the red stand is what we're looking at here. The red stand's gonna be stand 1. We'll just stay on this one here. I got a stand map coming up next, but this is good for a stand map. So I can say on the average, maybe I'll have 4 or 5 stands. Even on small properties, I'll do more stands for people because it's a small property and they want more detail. So I was glad to get away with 6 stands here. I probably was pretty right on with that, but I've had 12 and 13 stands before. It's a lot, but there's a lot of variability sometimes. So that's what I'm talking about, stand one, the North Woods they call it. All right, it's large saw timber and it's mixed oak. You can see all the other stands, mixed hardwoods. So there's only one mixed oak stand. And that needs to be protected somehow. The problem with that is we'll talk, let me go back to, now you know where stand one is. So here's my description of stand one. I'll read it out here. It's an upland mixed oak hickory stand in the North Woods. I brought it a little bit farther down around the west side of the mansion there because I just got into some big trees there and it really looked like the rest of the stand, but I kept them all together. Basal area is a forestry term though, but so we're breaking it down by basal area, which I won't explain that right now, but the stand is dominated by hickory. It's dominated by hickory. It's an oak stand. Well, the oaks are big and they're dying and they're falling over maybe. And so hickory has found a way to survive and take over. But there's a lot of red oak, so you got 25% red oak. And then you got hackberry. Then you got black oak. So it's all broken down in white oak. And then there's many other species because this stand has white ash in it that's died. There's openings, other things have taken over. All right, so I got 756. Native shrubs, I talked a little bit about the understory. I just want to show you the bottom here, competitive regeneration. You see that paragraph? Competitive regeneration. This is what we're talking about with this deer problem. And we'll just show you this stand on Saturday that it's insufficient. Regeneration is insufficient. What's regeneration? Well, I'm doing regeneration plots on my even numbered plots. I'm doing a 6-foot radius plot from my plot stick, and I'm actually counting the tiny seedlings that are in this plot. It's all the Silva program that we use. And on the 15 regeneration plots, only 8 plots had any seedlings. And these were mostly hickory. So it makes sense, hickory's there. A few oak, hackberry, and white ash. White ash is really doing well on many properties I'm on. Believe it or not, there's no live ash in the overstory, but there's a lot of understory white ash. Anyways, it's estimated that there may be over 75 oak seedlings per acre, so that's still pretty good, but when you're talking about 75 per acre, you're talking about a football field and you have 75 little trees and you have a deer population that are looking for those things that eat them in the wintertime. So that's kind of the problems that you run into. So real quick on closing here, what is the recommendation? So I'm putting all this information into a computer, and the computer, I'm surprised, is telling me to defer cutting. And I think, I think this is 10,000 board feet per acre. I can't remember what it was. We have an inventory table here. Well, what is my inventory? Oh, 9,494 board feet per acre. That's a lot of board feet per acre. 588,000 of that million board feet in this 160 acre stand. So you know it's got a lot of big trees. So. But still, my program is saying, the relative density is too low. You got big trees, you got, a few medium-sized trees. You don't have any understory trees. So you don't have the density from top to bottom in a stand like this. So we don't want you to cut it right now. We want you to wait. Well, what's going to happen when you wait? Nothing, probably. So sometimes I overrule these suggestions to not cut cause I'm out there and I'm saying, "Well, maybe we need to do some disturbance to get some. Well, we need acorn for one, so we definitely don't wanna cut the oak trees. Anyway, so they were saying defer cutting, so my suggestions, and so I'm gonna wanna do a recommended treatment based on, you know, my analysis. Mark the east boundary. I always say mark the boundaries, because you gotta know where your property is. And, establish walking trails through the woods. We have a trail through the woods, an old road, but I'm saying, get some walking trails, single track stuff, easy to build. And kind of wind up through the woods there, I put that in all my plans, because I'm a big forest hiker and runner, so. I tell everybody to put trails in your woods, so you can walk. People just wanna ride their ATVs. They do have some hazard trees I told them to deal with, and, the barberry is not real heavy in that stand, but it's controllable. And so, and there's some autumn olive, maybe on the north side of the North Woods. And so, and then number 6, monitor acorn crops. And oak regeneration and continued deer harvest, so they do have people hunting there. I record blinds, GPS, I put them on a map and I say, okay, well, you got a few hunting stands here, someone's hunting. You know, how many people you got hunting? I think it's important to continue to kill does especially, all right? You know, I'm sympathetic to Bambi sometimes too, but they are destroying our understory of our forest. I'm telling you, we don't have, even if I would find 400 oak trees per acre of seedlings, they're all just deer food. They're only a foot tall. They're never gonna go anywhere. All right, so that's my soapbox there with the deer, but, so each plan is described in detail, and, each stand has its own prescription. Right? So you don't wanna say, oh man, 180 acres, what am I gonna do first? Well, the plan of work here, there's your inventory page. Real quick, I'll just do this. You can't really see it sideways, but I guess I should have copied that over and turned it around. There's your 10-year plan of work, so they're given a guide on what they can do on their 6 stands for the next 10 years. Just to kind of spell it out for them, all right? And so this is what every forest landowner should have, some kind of a guide, a 10-year guide. If they're not gonna do all this other stuff, at least have something to guide you for 10 years, so you can make your forest a little healthier. And right now, you know, Claymont's forest is not healthy, but it's not unusual that for the rest of West Virginia. Really. So I don't know if we have even time for questions, but it's 8 o'clock now,
Yeah.
so if you want to take a few questions. If you want to take a few questions, or maybe I want to. But, you know, that, I went through that pretty quick, and we'll talk a little bit more about it on Saturday. Hopefully you can come. So 12 o'clock. Yes,
Do you use Silva on all your plans or just those that are interested in timber harvest?
yeah, I do, you know, but they don't. Sure, most of my woods are oak hickory, but they don't treat some of these stands right. I mean, the pine stand, they don't even. You know, they don't even understand the pine stand. Oh, you thin the pine stand. You don't thin the pine stand, you clear cut the pines generally. So yeah, they don't understand the pine stand, so. That's the only one they really have a lot of trouble with.
Did you say silver?
Silva.
Silva,
What's
yeah,
silva?
Silva. It stands for the silviculture of Appalachian hardwoods.
So,
So we're not really in the Appalachian hardwoods around here. I mean, this is,
Yeah.
you know, Ridge and Valley, we're kind of over on the, almost like the Piedmont. I don't know what to call it, but,
Mhm,
so it's different species.
mhm.
We do have, nice oak forest. Yes,
That document says grub area. What does grub mean in this context?
Where? Oh, there.
um. Okay, that's over there on the west side. Autumn olive and honey locust and Bradford pear. Nothing you can do to that stand. I'm saying rub it. I'm saying just go in there and replace your stand.
Okay.
So rip everything out.
Rip everything out. There's nothing, that's true, there's wildlife in there now, but. If you want that stuff growing on this great soil that you have, it's a waste. So, yeah, grub it and either replant, you'll have to replant it. Yeah, so that's a tall one there. That's why I put that way down on the bottom. Sage, black walnut, black cherry. So there's a few in there that you could save, and maybe they'll seed in, but I think you gotta replant it. I forgot to put that in. I don't really put that in the plan very often.
Yeah.
Okay,
Did
I
you
just-
say you saw, endangered species or something? I thought you mentioned something about that.
yeah, they do have threatened and endangered species on that property.
So does that affect your overall plan in a way about?
Sometimes it
the
does.
plot? Okay.
Especially if you're in the bad habitat. So this is a list. Some of these are plants, some are animals. Of course, the spotted turtle is one around here that could be found. They have the historical ranking of whether it's, when's the last time it was found. The Baltimore checker spot. 1951, but it could be here. So, a lot of this stuff is kind of a shot in the dark. And then even below there, the Madison Cave isopod, you maybe heard a lot about that one in some of these karst areas. It is in that range of the isopod. And then a lot of these come up with the bat thing, so the bat is down there too. We're in Cape buffer, so there are sometimes, even in Jefferson County, you have a bat restriction. I'm just doing a harvest for a guy over in Springfield, Hampshire County. He's within 5 miles of bats. And the NRCS is funding his habitat improvement, but they won't let the logger come in from April to October because of bat habitat. So yeah, it does affect. I haven't had too many of those. Yes.
Do you ever recommend controlled burns?
Well, yeah, I always say it's a good idea and I'm all for it, but not in West Virginia.
Because of the burn ban?
No, because there's too much liability and they having a hard time approving anything, especially on private property. Now, the feds can do it, they do it in NCTD. PVAS has done it, but they've had trouble getting their permits, right? So then you gotta burn after 5.
Mhm.
You gotta do your control burn after 5. So, but they've done it with a burn boss, so you gotta have a burn boss, which there's not too many of those around. And your fire is a great tool. I wish we would use it more often, but there's just too much liability. Now, the state forester right now, Jeremy, is possibly the way he's thinking, he might lift that, make that a little easier, but I don't know. It's a good tool. Yes.
I was just gonna throw out there that, there's been a couple fire scar studies that suggest the Great Limestone Valley, which, this area as well as Maryland up into Pennsylvania is all part of, burned on an average of every 3 to 12 years
Oh, yeah.
prior to, colonization. So it was definitely a fire adapted oak-based
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah, the Native Americans definitely burned it too when they were
Oh, yeah.
here. You know, they burned for a number of reasons. If you're in my master naturalist class, who's here, master naturalist? Yeah, I talk a lot about that on the habitat class, about the burning that was done here. It's historically been done for at least 3 to 5,000 years. But I don't usually put it in any of my plans. Appreciate your interest. Hope it wasn't too boring, but. I mean, I'll be around, available for any other questions right now. So I saw a gypsy moth egg mass. Gypsy moth's really bad. I don't know if you're still. Gypsy moth's gonna be bad again this year. Now, hopefully this wet, cold, damp weather that we've had, you know. But the little gypsy moth on the trees, little tiny gypsy moths coming out of the eggs right now. I just saw some today on an oak tree up in Morgan County. That whole Cacapen Valley is gonna get hit again. And that's killing trees now. This is the 3rd year in a row. I don't know why. I mean, it's just the weather. It's been dry Mays and Junes here the last, are you getting it up in Maryland?
Yeah, the egg mass surveys that,
Yeah.
Department of Ag does showed like, in the red, I think that's above 1,000 egg masses for whatever.
Yeah,
It's exactly north of where the Cacapen Valley is, so it's all, you know, it's all
Yeah, it's-
together.
yeah, and it's blowing. They blow east too, so I think possibly, it was on Cacapen Mountain, if you're from around here. North Mountain would be the next mountain, and I think North Mountain may have. Yeah, Sleepy Creek Mountain is what I'm talking about. Yeah, it was bad on Sleepy Creek, and then next one is North Mountain. I'm confused. Anyways,
Is that a danger to all types of trees or?
generally just oak trees, but as heavy as the population was in Morgan County this year, they were eating just about everything except pop. I mean, they were eating walnut leaves, maple leaves, because there were just so many of them, they didn't have anything else to eat. They ate the oak leaves there. So that's the big thing right now, I think, coming up in the next couple months is gypsy moth, you'll see defoliation. And the timber prices, if you're worried about that, is they're still holding right now, even though China is. They're not, nobody's exporting to China right now. Some of the companies are unloading containers